Hello, everybody. This is Francesca from the Educator's Room. Today we have Katie and Sarah here with us, and we're going to talk the most dreaded word in education, literacy. Katie and Sarah, introduce yourselves. Say hello and a little
Okay.
bit of your background.
Hi. You want to go first, Sarah?
Sure. I'm Sarah. I am a high school English teacher in Georgia, Metro Atlanta area, and I currently am teaching 10th and 12th grade English.
Okay, go
All
ahead.
right. I'm Katie, and I currently teach eighth grade English in Michigan, near Grand Rapids, and this is going to be my second year teaching eighth grade English. Before that, I taught high school English for 11 years. So here we go.
Here we go. And I'm Fran, and I was an English teacher for about 13 years, and I taught 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, journalism, everything. So before we get started, because in education right now there are tons of buzzwords, and one of the buzzwords that principals and districts are using is literacy. So for you guys, for us as ELA teachers, in 8th to 10th to 12th to all of the grades, what does the word literacy mean for you? Either one.
Well, I guess literacy can mean for me is like it's not just necessarily being able to read a book or read an article. It's more than just that. It's like being able to actually understand what maybe the author is saying, being able to interpret it, and taking your own, having your own take on it, making it relate to yourself, and adding that communication aspect to it. Maybe taking it beyond that and writing about it. I think possibly like students using social media to express themselves is all part of literacy nowadays as well. So,
So
and
what?
it's always changing. So.
That's good. Yeah, it's always changing. I remember like 5 years ago, literacy, not the word literacy was like unheard of. People would say it, but it wasn't like the buzzword that it is now. Like everybody's like literacy, 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 literacy. Katie, what do you define literacy as?
Actually, for the past 5 or 6 years, our entire district has been very literacy focused. So we've been doing a lot of things talking about what literacy is, and not just in reading in English, but also what math literacy is, um, and other things. And we kind of talk about how it's being able to know what something is about, kind of like Sarah said, but then also to be able to explain it to others, to be able to analyze it a little bit, to be able to make connections to it and relate it to yourself, relate it to the world outside of yourself as well. And so if you are math literate or current events literate or reading literate, it all has to do with, and I teach a foreign language, so we discuss what literacy means there too, to be literate in a language.
Oh, wow. What's the other language that you teach? Hold on, I can't hear you. What'd you say? Hello?
I also teach Spanish.
Oh, wow. I think you brought up a good point because literacy, a lot of times we think literacy, for me, it's about reading, speaking, listening, writing, reading. But, you can do all those things in a math classroom, in a science classroom, with a foreign language. So, it's so diverse. So, as we go through and as we talk about literacy, I want us to first talk about for the 2015-2016 school year. I know, Sarah, you started back today. I started back Wednesday. Katie, you don't start back till September. What are some of the things for English teachers, whether it's the beginning of the year, whether it's still summer, what are some of the things right now that teachers should be doing, let's say, to get ready to go back into the school year? For you, Katie, like you're starting in another month or so. So what should teachers be doing right now to kind of get their classrooms ready for literacy, for that high level of engagement of literacy? Hello? Hello?
I think she might have a slight delay.
Okay. Okay, so should I say it again? Hello? Okay. Go ahead. Hold on. I can't hear her. Can you hear her, Sarah?
No, I can't.
I can't hear you, Katie. Hello? Hello? Take your head. Tell her to take your headphones out. Let me see if that helps a little bit. Okay. Now we can hear you. So, I think, did you hear my last question? Okay, I think she just went off. Did she just go off?
I'm not sure.
I don't see her.
I think she's still there. She just may be having a little trouble.
Okay, so go ahead. So for the beginning of the school year, Sarah, what are some of the things that you're doing day one, getting your kids ready for literacy?
Well, you kind of go over the basics, like what you kind of expect, things like that. One thing I actually did today with a couple of my classes is I did a review, but I actually had them kind of do an interpretation kind of thing, where they were expressing a topic to me in their own way. I gave them the basics for it.
Wow.
We did an activity in two of my 10th grade classes where, just to introduce the class, where they were creating a human plot line.
Mm-hmm.
It was basically just review the concepts of plot line, but it was allowing them to teach each other and present it in their own way, and they're going to present it tomorrow. And the reason that I did that is like to kind of give them an introduction to how I teach my class with the tools that they're going to get a chance to use in my class. We talked about the writing that we do in class. Yeah, we are required to do, obviously, writing essays and things like that, and the questions that we are to do. But we also talk about the kinds of other summative assessments that we do in our class. Like I have them do a PSA project where they create a public service announcement. We do multimedia things because it's more than just writing as a way to express yourself. And that's all a part of what I think a lot of some English teachers I think might miss with when they're talking about literacy, is that they think they just have the kids read and then write. They have to, I think, go beyond that. They have to have the kids use like technology or use different ways of communication or expressing their ideas, creativity, that kind of thing. And so teachers need to, as they're starting the school year, I know a lot of states outside of Georgia and Tennessee and places like that are not heading back to school for at least 4 more weeks. So teachers need to start looking into those areas of what can I do that goes beyond just writing an essay. So for sure, because that's definitely what people people at my school do, is we go beyond just writing our 4 required essays every year.
So, Katie, what are you doing? That's really good, Sarah, because I think, like, especially like the plot line, when I was in the classroom, I tried to do things. I worked in a school where kids just weren't excited about literacy. A lot of the kids, not all of the kids, but one of the things we did when I taught 10th grade is that we started off, like, the very first day in class, as the kids came in, I would give them a book, and I would read to them for like 10, 15 minutes. And it was really a high interest book. And we would talk about it, and then we would take the discussion into what was happening in the world today. I always come back to my 2 favorite books to teach were Night and Left to Tell by Immaculée Ilbazaga. And what I liked about Immaculate's book was that it dealt with the Rwandan genocide. So the first chapter in the book is that she's hiding in this closet, and these killers are coming to get her. So when the kids came in, we would literally be reading that first chapter. It was like maybe 3 or 4 pages. I'd read it to them, and they'd be so hooked. And then I'd put down the book, and I'd talk about, what the book was going to be about. This is what we're going to do in English this year. And it kind of set the tone for, in their words, like cool books that we were going to be reading. So, Katie, what do you do? Like, you don't go back to school for another month. What are some of the things that you do to get your kids ready for, or get you ready and get your kids ready for another year of literacy?
One of the things that I've been doing is Reader's Workshop,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a huge hit last year, and I hope to expand it this year. On the first day, the kids, I read them little excerpts from books in my library. I talk about the books in the library. On the very first day of class, they get to check out books from my classroom library. We start um, a reader's notebook, so everybody has a reader's notebook, and we start doing those things right away. Um, we also do book clubs instead of whole class books. We do a few whole class books, but we're always reading individually at the same time, because I think one of the things is for kids, for literacy, they think about reading and they think about full class reading, and they think about not having a choice. And I think when we show kids that they can have a choice and then relate it to other things that someday they'll be able to choose, like reading what media they read, or reading what news outlets they read, and how they can relate all of the things together. I'm always reading. If you're friends with me on Facebook or Goodreads, you know I'm constantly reading. And
Yeah.
I use that with my students to show them, like, for instance, I just finished reading Me Before You, and then I read up on things about assisted suicide and things like that, and I relate it to things, and I wrote about it a lot in my reader's notebook so I can share that with my students. And we read a lot, we write a lot, and we talk a lot.
And that's an organic place to start with, because I have a second grader and a kindergartner and a 10th grader at home, and one of the things my daughter struggles with reading, and I was telling my husband, I said we have to show her that we read, because a lot of times I read things on my phone, but they might not necessarily see me with a book per se, so I have to make it a point to read and find different things that I want to read and that'll interest me. So I like that, and then the book clubs, those are all great tools. Now let me ask you guys this. As you go into the school year, I was given this question by a principal probably about 2 weeks ago, and they asked me, they said, I'm trying to increase literacy in my school. And I was already looking kind of crazy, because I'm like, what does that really mean when you're trying to increase literacy? But that's a whole nother discussion. But basically, he wanted his kids reading, writing, speaking more at a higher level. And he said, how do I do it? He said, I have a lot of students who are low readers. I have a lot of students who, they're behind academically. How can I include literacy in everything they do? And I told him, I said, everybody needs to read, write, and speak. And it was so simple, but he was just like, how do I do it? So you're going into the school year. It's 2015, August, September, whenever you start, and you're doing all these great things you have planned. But what happens to the kids who are just like, they hate reading, they hate writing, all they want to do is talk, how they text? What do you do for those kids? Like, how do you even approach the subject? How do you even make them feel comfortable in an ELA classroom?
Last year, towards the end of the school year, I brought in surprisingly, this was the weirdest thing. I brought in the use of hashtags into a class discussion. We weren't using their phones. I used their phones in class for different activities, but I started writing hashtags on the board, and I had kids give me popular ones that they saw on like Instagram or Twitter or whatever they were using, and we had discussions about how these specific ones that they were seeing were being used, and what the topics were, and why they were being used, and whether or not they were being effective. And then we were reading a book at the time. I think we were reading Moneyball at the time, and I wrote 3 chapters on the board. And I said, all right, I want you guys to pair up, and I want you guys to start talking to each other. Sorry, my dog's whining. She wants my attention. But I told my students, I want you guys to pair up, and I want you guys to work together, and I want you, for each chapter, to come up with the perfect hashtag. And I want you guys to go write it up on the board. And when I call out the hashtag, I want you to explain to me why this hashtag, and it has to be perfect to be able to use it in a short message. is what explains the chapter. And the kids had so much fun doing this because they had to use their critical thinking skills to best explain it. We did practice session before I set them off until, with books that they had read in the past, like they had read the year before, because these were sophomores. They had read To Kill a Mockingbird the year before, so a lot of them were trying to had come up with hashtags just quickly off the top of their head for like To Kill a Mockingbird. It's like some of them were going like pocket watch in the tree. Why was that important? Kind of things like that. And why it was meaningful. And it's like, see, so you guys could figure that part out. You guys could do these chapters. And it made them interested in what they were reading. And that's one way you can do it is find those things that they're already interested in, they're already doing it anyway, and make it connected to the stuff that they're reading. Make it interesting for them. Use it as a teaching tool instead of saying, "Hey, write me a summary of this essay or of this chapter." Have them connect it to, still have them do the summary part, but also have them explain it to you in a different way. Verbalize it as well, because sometimes that helps them get those ideas out.
Yeah, so that's really cool to use.
That's just one way.
Oh my God, I wouldn't even think to do that, but we had a teacher at the last school that I was at. He used Instagram, and every day he put up a graphic of something they were talking about in class, and the kids had to respond in so many words. And so it was a good way for them to, have a discussion using social media, incorporating literacy. So that's really cool. Katie, what do you do up in Michigan? What do you do if that student just comes in your class and they're just like, I hate to read, I hate to write, I'm not going to do it?
Oh, I get lots of kids who are like, I'm not a reader, and I'm not going to do this. And I teach in a Title I school, and I get my fair share of kids who tell me they're not readers. And my first answer is always, that's because you haven't met the right book yet. And I make it my mission to find the book that student will read. Even if it's just that one book, they will read a book on their own that they love. And of my 150 students last year, everybody read at least one book. So that's good. I had one kid read Winger by Andrew Smith, and he said to me, Mrs. Slider, this book ruined my life. And I was like, I'm sorry? And he said, I just started reading it all over again. The kids, they'll read. If given a choice, I've noticed the kids will read. I've had kids say, there's nothing in your library I like because I like soccer players. And I said, who do you like? And I went out and bought a couple books on soccer players just so the kid would read. But we do have resistance. Luckily, we have a school-wide initiative that we've been doing for so long that all of the language and all of the vocabulary surrounding the stuff we do is common with these kids from about 6th grade all the way through 12th grade. So we do common thinking maps. They're basically graphic organizers, but they're the same 8 thinking maps. Kids start using them all the way. They're going to start in elementary school, I guess, this year. So they'll have the same 8 maps all the way through high school that we use. We use a critical reading thing called close and critical reading, and it asks 4 questions of a text, and kids do these from 7th grade all the way up through 12th grade, and it's just all of the language, all of the vocabulary that we've used has become second nature to the kids. I mean, it even becomes a little bit of a joke because they'll be like, what? CCR? Ugh. But they actually love it because they just do. It's some of their best writing. They know that they know how to do it. They're confident in it, and it ends up being some of their, and if we do something that they've never done, like with my 9th graders last year, I had them do the close and critical reading with a poem instead of nonfiction, which is what they're used to doing. And there was some struggle, but in the end, they were like, that was cool. Or, I thought it was going to be easy because it's way shorter than an essay to read, but actually it was a little harder because the how does the author say it part you really had to think about what we learned in class, and they did a really nice job. So I think a lot of it has to do with being able, the kids all know what to expect. They've been doing it for so long. Everybody's on board as far as our staff. So now we're kind of also bringing math into that, doing some math across the curriculum, and what kinds of things can we incorporate, say into my ELA class, or when I was teaching Spanish, what could I do with my Spanish units that involved, a little math or graphs or something.
That's really cool. And you brought, both of you guys have brought up good points about like initiatives. I think so many times like principals get this idea that I'm going to do a literacy initiative. My kids are not reading, my kids are struggling, our scores are low, kids aren't graduating career and college ready, and heck, they're just not reading, period. As you look at it's the beginning of the year for some people, it's about to be the beginning of the year for other people. What are some things, if you are a principal right now and you know that in your school there is a struggle for literacy, kids are coming in 3 or 4 grade levels below, what are some of the key things for a literacy program? Like I know you said vocabulary, Katie, and that's a really good point because kids have to get used to the vocabulary they see, and it can't be a hit or miss. So what are some components of a literacy plan that are doable and that can be implemented almost immediately?
Let's see. Some of the very first things we did back when we first started 6 or so years ago was, the very first thing was we said, okay, we can start out with literacy is basically thinking skills. So we started out with the 8 thinking maps that we had. We said, okay, here are 8 thinking maps. These are the ones that our district is going to use. We don't want some people using Venn diagrams and some people using this. Everybody's going to use, these specific 8 thinking maps, and they really cover everything from comparing and contrasting to flow to cause effect to everything, all in these 8 things. So, they really discourage us from bringing other kinds of graphic organizers in, because this way kids all the way from 6th grade through 12th grade can say, let's see, I have to do a compare and contrast. That's a double bubble map. They've all learned double bubble for that. So just getting some stuff like that in that you can hand to your teachers during those first few days before school, rather than saying, get your kids to read more. That's hard to, it's hard to really know how to hand that to your teachers. I think it's easier, a more right now thing would be, okay, this is what we're going to do. We want everybody to get on the same page with these thinking skills. And then you can always build on that.
Okay. Sarah, what do you think? What are some things that you think? Like, I like how Katie was saying, we use the same graphic organizer, because for those struggling kids, like, as somebody who loves to read and loves to write, I love the autonomy of doing what I want to do. But for those kids who struggle, it's good for them to see consistency through so they get familiar. Sarah, what are some things that you think should be part of a workable literacy plan?
Well, honestly, I've seen some teachers have great success with being allowed to let their kids have a lot more choice in a lit circle format. We sometimes, sometimes it's cool to have like everybody in a grade level maybe read a lot of the same books, but sometimes I think it can be lost without having kids get that at least maybe one unit in a year where they have that choice of exploring and with other kids maybe in their similar skill level and getting to choose something that maybe interests them. And I know some teachers I've seen some teachers do that, and those kids really, it speaks to them. It helps them. They find those books that, you work with those kids to help them figure out what they can read. It goes, without them selling themselves short. Those lots of kids will try to get the easiest they can get, obviously. But working with those kids and that choice model, I think would benefit a lot of literacy programs. Because I think too many literacy programs rely too much on everybody has to be all the time doing the same thing. And I've been in schools where it has been you have to be exactly on the same thing, or it's not the program. And that, in some situations it's a good thing, in some situations it's not. It just, I guess it does depend on the school. But there needs to be that choice piece in some literacy, I think, programs for sure.
Do you think?
I agree with that. I think we have a lot of common language, but we have a lot of choice for our students.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think I totally agree with the choice thing being important too. Yeah. Kids need ownership.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good point because, for one side, you want to be consistent. You want to give kids certain, they're going to be familiar with certain things. It's not going to be a hit or miss. But on the other side, you have kids who are those readers, who need that choice, who need that ability to say, or those teachers also to say, this is what I think will work well for my students and for me. What are some other things, I worked in a priority school and I was a literacy coach for a couple of years. What do you think the place of writing? Because I found that was a sore thumb with a lot of our teachers. We were talking about literacy. We all bought into the kids needed to read more, but it was kind of pulling teeth to get teachers to understand kids needed to write more across the curriculum, because the ELA teachers make them write, the history teachers make them write, but science, math, it was a struggle. So what do you do in your literacy plan to address those other subject areas? Because so many times we hear literacy and we think that's it, that's ELA's job, sometimes social studies. What do we do for those other subject areas? What should they be doing in a literacy plan?
Well, we often talk about writing is thinking. So a lot of times we'll have, I know our science department does an amazing job having kids journal through a lot of the science stuff that they do and think past, okay, if this is what we're doing in science, this is how it relates to the world, these are some implications it might have. Having discussions with each other in whole class and keeping notebooks and things like that. So our science department and our math department as well has taken it. We've really focused in the last year or two on making it real world applicable, which means for kids before they talk about it and before they start making these real world things, they tend to write about it first, and then they read and share. And for instance, our 11th grade English, they choose a book each year that they read by an author, and then that author comes and does a author visit and a reading, and then our students do a writing based on that. Our history department has had World War II vet come in, and the kids do a writing based on that. We've done, I know our AP Bio class reads The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, and then does some real life implication things and writing and journaling and talking about those kind of things. So I think the writing, once you've convinced the non-ELA teachers that writing is thinking, and we do a lot of teacher writing as thinking to kind of guide us, and we have teachers teaching teachers teaching teachers in our district how to do that. So we've really come a long way with that. I would say that there's still some that it's harder to convince them, but once they can wrap their minds around writing is thinking, it's not necessarily, it really is a process, not always the product. That's what's important. A lot of the teachers can get behind that. And once they know they don't have to grade every little thing, just so that the kids are doing it, that helps too.
That's a really good point, because I think kids connect, like writing is thinking. And if I'm not a good thinker, I'm probably not going to be a pretty good writer. So like when we spoke about the Holocaust here in Atlanta, we have we have a mini Holocaust museum. It's not big, but it's, it's nice. And one of the things that they do is that they bring survivors to speak to the kids. And of course, a lot of those survivors were like little kids. They're extremely old. And I remember taking my kids there, and, it was very interesting for them to have to be extremely quiet to listen and to hear the man speak, but also to understand through his accent, because his accent was still very thick. And just some of the things that he told them, our kids were just mesmerized. But when they got back, they were able to write about it because they had actually made a connection. Sarah, what do you guys do at your school for like the non-ELA subject areas for the literacy plan? What can they do? What do they do at your school?
Well, I'm not sure exactly, like 100% for the entire other departments. I do know that, in a couple of the science classes that a lot of the kids do, like some journaling for like different projects that they do, and I know that in the social studies classes that they start doing that as well. The senior students, they do a capstone project portfolio where they do the whole year. They do a research and work with mentors for a career that they're interested in for after they graduate from high school, whether or not they go to college or military or technical school, and they present it in the spring, and they do a research paper and things. And it used to be all in the English department, and this year they've changed it where parts of it are only with the English department, and other parts are in the other part, I think the social studies department, and I think the science department. I know definitely the social studies department. So like my department, we're working with them on, like letter writing, of course, but like also their research paper. But like their government and econ classes, which it makes sense, they're working on like, their business plan if they're wanting to run a business and things like that, because, it makes sense. So I'm not sure, like, completely 100%. I know at schools that I've taught at when I was a social studies teacher in high school and middle school, I know me personally, I did a lot of writing in my class. Like, I want you to write from the perspective of a person living in a time period we were discussing. Or, I want you to write a letter to a company proposing a solution to a problem that you found with that product. When I was teaching like economics, so I know that it is possible, definitely in the social sciences. I've heard many social studies teachers in my career say that they can't do a lot of writing, which is bunk, completely. But I do know that it is possible, and I know that science it's possible because my younger sister, who is a elementary school science teacher, she's teaching fourth grade this year. She's been teaching fifth grade for the last couple years. She has her kids do writing pieces in her class. It's like maybe 2 paragraphs, after simulations or something, but she has them do reflections about what they've done. And it's across all levels, students with learning disabilities all the way up to gifted. And she does that with all her students to prepare them for everything. So
those are really good. And I think literacy plans have to be valuable, and they have to be a document that's ever changing. So many times in schools, they're just there, they're in a binder, and nobody ever says, are we really doing what we say we're doing? What are the checkpoints? How do we know it's working? What do we see? What are some of the things that we can measure our success on? Now, we talked a little bit, or I think somebody mentioned, one of the things that the keystone of any literacy plan or literacy in a school is what students read. So I have to ask you, what is the number one, in your experience, what is the number one book that seems to get your kids super excited about reading? For me, it was about a nonfiction book about the Rwandan genocide. They loved it. But for you guys, what are some of the books that have gotten your kids, like, that you are just like, oh my God, the books are leaving the classroom, I can't keep up with them, I love them? What are some of the books that you guys?
for my 10th graders, it's Night.
Mm-hmm.
I have a couple of students at open house when I was talking to some 10th graders, and a couple of my former students from last year popped in from my block class last spring, and I was talking to my new students about Night, because we're gonna start with it this month, probably next week, and they were just like, oh no, and I was saying, it's really intense and everything, and they're like, oh no no no, you guys, yeah, it's so sad and it's so horrible, but it's so good. And I loved it. They just couldn't stop talking about it. And the parents are like, oh wow, you guys are gonna read that book? Yeah, yeah, no no no, you got to read this book. And that is something that they didn't really like any other book that we read last year. They all wanted to read that book. One thing I think they're gonna really love this year is probably going to be also, we've added a new book to our curriculum. We're replacing a book that we read last year, Moneyball. We're going to read the Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, because we were going to read something else, but we have the books. Because of starting a new class, we had to buy other books. So we're reading Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and I think it's going to be really interesting for our 10th graders, because I think they don't realize how they know the story so well, because it's everywhere. But it's going to lead to an interesting discussion of what good and evil is and what makes a person good and evil. With my 12th graders, I'm interested to see what they're going to find. That's good, because we're reading Death of a Salesman, 1984, and Metamorphosis, and possibly Brave New World this year. So, and Beowulf. We're also reading Beowulf. Yeah. So I'm interested to see which one the 12th graders like. So.
Let's see. For me, over the years, when I taught 11th grade, my kids loved Of Mice and Men.
Yeah.
They always read ahead. I didn't even have to give out a reading schedule. I could just say, we're going to read this, and pass it out on a Friday, and most of the kids Monday would come back and see, like, how could you make me read this? It was so sad. Best book ever. I also had kids who would get very excited when we read A Raisin in the Sun. I had with my 12th grade classes, they loved Beowulf. I had a lot of guys that year, and they loved the grisly, gruesome awfulness of it. As far as and then last year for 8th grade, my students really enjoyed The Giver. A lot of kids read that ahead and then went ahead and checked out all of Lois Lowry's other books from my classroom library. Books that I can't keep on my shelf that fly out of my classroom, anything by Rainbow Rowell. I've been trying to read. I read Eleanor and Park, and then I tried to read more of her stuff, but my students kept checking it out. I Can't Keep Winger by Andrew Smith. In fact, I lost 3 copies and bought 3 more because the kids keep checking it out. I have, what else? The kids I have a whole list on my blog of books that I can't keep them in my classroom. The kids love them. There's wait lists for them. There's usually kids who are totally into Stephen King. There's a lot of, the Maze Runner series was really popular this year. A lot of kids, non-readers, got into that, and they really liked that a lot. Girls who were non-readers started reading the Princess Diaries, and they got into that, and then moved on to the Selection series, which is a higher reading level. And some of these kids, I didn't think they could read that high, and they surprised me this year. So there's a lot of anything by John Green. The kids just devour that. So it's really exciting when I get new books and they know it and they see a pile on my desk and they're like, oh, new books in the library, woo! So that's pretty fun. I even got kids excited about The Great Gatsby a few years in a row, so I'm pretty proud of myself for that.
I have to say
Those
about
are all
Raisin
really
in the Sun. Oh my gosh. When I was a senior in high school, we read that in my AP literature class, and I just remember we were trying to finish it before we went on spring break, and we barricaded the door against the 10th graders that were coming in, the honors 10th grade class, coming into our teacher, Miss Womack's class, and trying to finish the last scene. And it was like 10 minutes past the bell, and we're finishing it. And my teacher was standing at the door telling the 10th graders to quit whining. You guys were fine. She was going to let us stay and write us passes because we had to finish Raisin in the Sun. And they were just all confused. Why were you guys so interested in trying to finish a play? You guys are nerds. And we're like, no, we have to finish it. We have to finish it.
I still have a former student who every year on my birthday writes on my Facebook wall, Walter, eat your damn eggs. She loved it.
You know, you guys have brought us some like really great books. Let me ask you guys this. As we talk about books, we've talked about writing, we've talked about literacy plans, what would be the ultimate, if you could cover your own curriculum, but what would be the ultimate project for you to show kids the realm of what they've read? For example, we used to do a project where the kids would have to pick a book. They have to pick out a social issue in the book. They have to present it, argue it. We did a big project. They had to present it to a panel of people. What would be a dream project for your kids to do? Performance project, project-based learning, anything like that. What would be something that you would have them do that just makes you think, oh my God, I wish we could do this with every book that we read?
That's a big question.
Yeah, that is a really good question.
Okay, so I'll start to give you guys some time. I love the project that we did where we had kids go and present, but I really wanted to take the kids either to Rwanda or to the concentration camps. I really wanted to take them so they could kind of see that. And we watched the video of Elie Wiesel when he goes back to the concentration camps with Oprah. And he says, this is my last time I'm going. I don't want to go anymore. I'm really trying to, I don't want to go anymore. And the kids were just like, oh my God, do these places still exist? Can people visit them? I'm like, yeah. And I really wanted, that would have been a great cumulative project with that book. So I wish we could have done that, but, Okay, yeah. So you guys turn.
When we read Raisin in the Sun, it was a while ago. It's been a while since I taught 11th grade, but 2 years ago, I went with the Spanish classes to Chicago, and we were on the bus, and we passed Clybourne Park. And one of the students in the back of the bus yelled up to me, Mrs. Slider, is that the same Clybourne Park? And I said, yes, it is, and I think, I would love to be able to take, when I taught American Lit, we read The Scarlet Letter, and we read, we did all this stuff with the Salem Witch Project that the kids just so got into, and I would love to be able to take them, on any sort of tour of places where these things happen, because I teach in a district where a lot of these kids, they're not leaving my city, they're going to graduate from high school, and they're going to get jobs. And I get down on my knees and pray that they'll go to college away from where we are and see something other than our crumbling little city. And lots do, but they just don't have the opportunity. And I would love to give them that opportunity to see these places that they've read about in books and that they've only been able to create in their imaginations or what they Google imaged, so that they could see where this stuff happened.
That's really good. I would have freaked out too if I saw Clybourne Park. I'm like, oh my God! And the book ends in such a weird way that you're like, oh, what happens? They move. What happened? And Lorraine Hansberry died at such a young age, and it's like, I wish she had made a part 2 or ended the story. I think they said one of her plays kind of picks back up, but I haven't read that play. But I just wish it had ended a little bit. We had known what happened to that family.
My students, I like to listen to what they think would happen once the family has moved in, and what would be hard and what would be good. And a lot of my students, they're like, I'd love to be hopeful, but and so they really identify with that play, and it's just, there's a lot that I think I would do with that if I could.
Sarah, what would you do?
I have so many different ideas that I'm having to just pick one right now. But I honestly, just because of being both social studies and English, and 10th grade, since I teach mostly 10th grade, it combines so much of it with the books that we read in our district. Everything has a historical context almost. I would want my students to be like almost like documentarians, because we discuss so many different social issues. We talk about human rights, we talk about dictatorships, we talk about apartheid, courage, all this stuff, and so many of the topics that we are discussing are still important today, but the people who live them and survive them are disappearing, from old age, or just time passing, or it's just the stories are being forgotten, that or the kids don't know about it until they read the stories. It's just like, I want my students to be able to just start talking to others, and start recording those stories, and writing maybe narratives of people, just to have literature and those histories passed on. So that would be my dream, to have my kids become documentarians.
That's really cool.
And yeah, that'd be cross-curricular. That'd be awesome.
That's really cool. Now, okay, so I know we all have, Sarah, I know you're exhausted. Katie, me and you have babies to take care of. So I want to end it. I want you guys to tell me your favorite book, and what your number one goal is for this year, okay?
Favorite, but I'm looking at Sarah and she's doing the same thing as me. I'll try to pick one book.
I'm looking at my bookshelves, and because I just moved a month ago, and I'm still have 4 boxes of books, and I have 3 bookshelves full of books right now. So yeah.
Well, I say that because I'm friends with Katie. I'm friends with both of you guys on Facebook, and every week Katie has a new book. I
just bought a book yesterday.
And I'm trying to. I want her to give me a list of her books, because I'm trying to, when I go to Target, it becomes overwhelming for me to find a book, and I'm like, okay, I just need someone to tell me what's a good book, and let me read it, and then I just go from there. So I'm gonna start to give you guys some time, and you can do your top 5. And I'm looking over my bookshelf to try to see. So I know I have one, so we'll just go with this one. I love A Lesson Before Dying. It's a great book for my kids. So many of my kids go through the legal system, and sometimes they're innocent, sometimes they're guilty, but this is a great story about just becoming a man. And my kids are so angry when he dies, and for a crime he didn't commit. I love Left to Tell. I love Othello. I'm looking at my books. It really is a lot. Oh, let me show you guys this. This is Left to Tell. So this is the book Left to Tell. It is excellent, excellent. I read this book in a day, and it was so good that my boys who would come in class and do nothing they stole the book. They were like, I'm sorry, this is my book, because it's bloody. So basically she loses her whole family in the genocide, and then she meets the people who did this to her family, and she forgives them. And so it's a really, really good story. So, okay, I'm done. Pick some books. What are your favorite books?
Okay. Something that's just been my favorite book since I was a little girl, or really since 7th grade, is A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. Loved it since I was a middle schooler. It just, I don't know, it just spoke to me. I've actually tracked down like a second edition from like the 40s. First edition was like way too expensive, so I just settled for a second edition because somebody sold it for super cheap. They didn't know what they had. Um, a book called Paris Without End, which is a biography about Ernest Hemingway's first wife. The book's important to me, but it speaks to me a lot. And let's see. It's going to sound silly, but the last Harry Potter book, I love that book. I will read it just because I love reading it. Knight's been a favorite book of mine. I didn't read that until, honestly, I became a teacher. I don't know why. I remember reading it and then talking to my dad about it because he told me he read it in college in the 70s and in his religious studies class, and he said there was a room full of college students just crying the whole time because it was a book that was new to them, and it was hard for them. And then right now, a book I'm reading, I just started, is I've never read it before, and I'm loving it, and I'm reading it for work, and it's A Brave New World because I'm having to read it because my 12th graders are going to read it.
Oh.
And for a book written in 1932 about dystopian society, like 1,000 years in the future, it is crazy. It's pretty awesome. So, but it's really good so far, and I like it, and I can see why I like dystopian society books. So it's fun. But yeah, that's what I'm liking right now. I have way too many books I like, so I had to narrow it down. It changed. It'll change like next week. So.
Great Gatsby. The first time I read it, I hated it as an 11th grader, and then I read it in college, and I loved it, and now I've read it probably over 1 million times. And
That's the same thing with me.
And I never stop finding new stuff in it, and I never stop being amazed at Fitzgerald's process. I'm kind of a fan of the expat writers of that time because I love Ernest Hemingway as well. And John Steinbeck, who was an expat, but he was right around that time. East of Eden is probably another one of my most favorite, simply because the writing is gorgeous. I love, my newest book that I love is called All the Bright Places by Jennifer Niven. It's beautiful. It's a YA lit book about this kid named Finch and this girl named Violet, and other than going to the same school, they have nothing in common, but they meet when they are both on top of the bell tower at school because they are both thinking of jumping. And the book is amazing. I can't wait to introduce it to my students this year. Let's see, what else? I have so many.
Was that book at Target? I saw that book somewhere.
Yes! Yeah, it is at Target.
I thought about buying that book, and I was like, I don't know. Okay, I'm going to buy the book.
Get that one, and you'll read it fast, too, and you'll laugh, and your heart will break, and it's so wonderful. So,
oh, my God. Okay, yeah.
That's a good one. I also love Alice in Wonderland. Has always been my favorite, the Lewis Carroll, which now I have a daughter named Alice. So there's that. The Winnie the Pooh books are also my favorite, and I have a boy named Eddie, and I call him my Edward Bear because that is Winnie the Pooh's real name. And I love Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and I have a son named Charlie. So, yeah, I all the way from the little kids type stuff all the way up through the literature. I've got a lot that I like.
Yeah, and one of the things and we're going to continue to have these conversations for those of us who are joining us. We want to talk to real teachers about what's really happening in the classroom, and some of the things that we love that we don't get to talk about on a regular basis. And so we will continue to have these conversations throughout the school year, and we'll bring back Katie, we'll bring back Sarah, we'll bring back some more of our writers, because it's so important for us to not only, we use the word literacy, but what's happening in our classrooms, what are some books that we're loving. And before we leave, because I think this is a really, really important point, can we end this with some tips for parents? If I'm a parent and I know that my child is a struggling reader, writer, he doesn't speak well, what are some things, can you just throw out some things for some parents to do? Because I meant to do that, so please forgive me. But just some things that some parents can do to encourage their child to be more literate.
Well, one thing that we do at our house, and I have an almost first grader and a 3-year-old, is we just talk a lot. We talk about, we have the news on, and I know sometimes that's not so age appropriate for a 6-year-old, but we do talk about what's in the news. We talk about what's happening with people we know. We did just finish reading Charlie and the Chocolate Factory together, and we talk about would you want to live in a chocolate factory? Would that be fun? And we talk about, and I think just talking about stuff and encouraging kids to see you reading and to read with them. It's to show that kids who hear a fluent reader read and who see fluent readers reading are more likely to become fluent readers themselves. So reading needs to be a part of your life.
Yeah, that's really good. And to piggyback on that, I would say pick something your child likes to read. Find something that they want to talk about, whatever it is, and become interested in it. Sarah, what do you say to parents who are having trouble?
One thing I have told parents, don't be afraid, honestly, of comic books and graphic novels. If your child shows an interest in those things, that could be your gateway into getting your child into reading. I have seen that happen for students. Those visuals get them connected to into reading. So don't be afraid if that's something that your student is interested in. Also, when it comes to writing, I've had parents who ask me, "What do I do to help my child write? Just to get them started on it." These might have been middle schoolers, even high schoolers. I said, just start with the basics, of just sentences. Have them talk about their favorite game or talk about their favorite, football player or basketball player, whatever they're interested in. Have them write a sentence describing it. Have them write a sentence describing something that they see. Get them just to start thinking about things in a way that's going to have them express themselves, to let them take their time. But always get them talking about it, always get them describing it, and then have it transfer into that as well, or into the writing part as well as you move into the assignment area. And yeah, just start also just like you guys have said, just find the things that they also like to read as well. Don't be afraid if they want to just read about sports at first. If that's what's interesting to them, transfer it into something else that's still sports related, and it'll transition into more a broader field. So.
All right, ladies, it has been a joy talking to you guys. We're going to do this again. Hold on for just one second. You guys, Katie, can you give everybody your blog address, and Sarah, give everybody your blog address? How can they contact you on Twitter? All of the above. So go ahead.
I write, my blog is Slider Nation. It's SLUITER Nation.com, and I am K Slider on Twitter. And yeah.
Go ahead, Sarah.
And my blog is currently down right now, so I'm not really using it, but you can find me on Twitter at edtechie, TECHIE, teacher. That's edtechie teacher. And I'm on Twitter. I do stuff a lot on there all the time. And yeah, so that's where I'm at.
All right, guys. You guys hold on for just one second, and thank you guys for joining us. Catch us next week. Bye-bye.